The morning light filtered softly through the windows of Kelly Ripa and Mark Consuelos' New York apartment, a quiet reminder of the day ahead. But that morning, unlike so many others, felt different. As Kelly sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had long gone cold, there was a stillness between them that neither knew how to break. For years, their relationship had been defined by easy laughter, playful teasing, and an undeniable bond. But now it was overshadowed by something deeper, a sense of uncertainty neither had expected. It had started with small signs, fatigue, slowing down, but they didn't understand until it was impossible to ignore. And when the news came, it was a soft whisper rather than a loud declaration, something that would shift everything they thought they knew about their future. A diagnosis. Wrapped in uncertainty. The diagnosis didn't come with flashing lights or urgent whispers. Instead, it arrived quietly, buried under layers of medical terminology and cautious pauses. The doctor's words were gentle, almost as if each one was selected to soften the weight of what they meant. It wasn't life-threatening, but it was serious. The kind of thing that would demand a change in lifestyle, in how Mark approached his work, his energy, his physicality. Kelly, ever the pillar, held Mark's hand as they absorbed the weight of those words. That moment marked a shift, not just in Mark's life, but in the very fabric of their partnership. In the silence that followed, Kelly made a promise to herself and to him. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The public's curiosity versus personal truth. When the news eventually made its way to the public, it came with headlines, speculation, and a whirlwind of social media comments. Everyone wanted answers, wanted to know the specifics, to have everything laid out in black and white. But Kelly, who had spent so many years in the public eye, knew something that the public didn't. Fear doesn't announce itself with noise. It doesn't shout for attention. Instead, it lingers quietly, waiting for the moments when you're least prepared. When Kelly finally spoke publicly, she wasn't sharing medical facts. What she revealed was far more personal, a glimpse into the vulnerability that fear can bring. It wasn't about the illness, it was about the silence, the uncertainty, and the deep love that grows stronger in the face of such moments. Facing vulnerability and the fear of change. Mark, for his part, struggled most with the sense of losing control. He had always been someone who pushed through, someone who kept moving even when everything seemed to demand rest. But now, with the diagnosis hanging over them, he faced a new reality, one in which slowing down wasn't just inevitable, it was necessary. It terrified him. Not because he was in denial, but because he didn't recognize this new version of himself. What does stopping mean? Mark wondered aloud, his voice heavy with the fear of an unfamiliar self. In that moment, Kelly, ever the steady force, reached out and softly whispered, "It means you finally get to meet a part of yourself you've been too busy to know." Her words, tender but firm, were a quiet invitation to let go of fear and embrace the uncertainty with open arms. Adjusting to a new normal recovery, both emotional and physical, was never a smooth line. There were days filled with lightness, with laughter, when they felt like themselves again. Other days, however, were heavier. Days when frustration lingered, unanswered questions filled the air, and the weight of the unknown seemed unbearable. But amidst the turbulence, there was growth. They began to adjust, learning new routines and making space for stillness where there used to be chaos. Morning walks replaced runs, quiet dinners replaced crowded events, and in the midst of it all they started listening. Not just to the doctors, but to each other. Kelly discovered that she didn't always have to be the strong one. Mark learned that resting wasn't a weakness. Together, they learned that love doesn't always show up in grand gestures. It often appears in the quiet, shared moments of stillness. Choosing love over fear. When Kelly finally addressed the situation publicly, she did so with intention. She didn't focus on the diagnosis itself. She focused on the journey they had been on. "This isn't a story about illness," Kelly said, her voice steady but full of meaning. "This is a story about awareness, about paying attention, about choosing love over fear, even when fear is loud." Her words resonated deeply, not just with fans, but with anyone who had ever sat at a kitchen table in the quiet of the night, grappling with their own fears. The response was overwhelming. Messages flooded in from people who saw themselves in Kelly's vulnerability, who recognized their own silent battles. What had once been a private struggle became something universal, something everyone could relate to. The courage to move forward. In the months that followed, Mark and Kelly's lives began to shift in ways that felt profound. Fear didn't vanish, but it no longer controlled them. Instead, it reminded them to savor the small moments, the ones they had once rushed through without a second thought. Mark started writing again. Not scripts, but reflections. Thoughts on gratitude, questions without answers. The quiet courage it takes to face change. Kelly would find his notebook, often left open on the counter, and read it slowly, feeling the weight of his honesty. They laughed more, genuine laughter, not the kind that's meant for the cameras, but the kind that comes from shared experiences and inside jokes. They argued less, understanding how fragile time could be. The beauty of small moments. As they adjusted to their new rhythm, Kelly and Mark found that life, though changed, was still full of beauty. The mornings were slower, but they felt richer. The nights were quieter, but there was a deeper sense of peace. Mark, once afraid of slowing down, began to discover the joy that comes with stillness. Kelly, ever the storyteller, learned that not every story needs an audience to be meaningful. They danced in the kitchen again, not for show, but because it felt good to be together. The future remained uncertain, but uncertainty no longer felt like an enemy. It became a reminder to love deeply, to listen more, and to appreciate the fleeting moments that once seemed unimportant. The gift of clarity. Through all of this, Kelly and Mark came to realize that sometimes life's most difficult moments bring unexpected gifts. The diagnosis, though it had initially shaken them, had ultimately given them clarity. Life was no longer measured by the rush of deadlines or the constant pursuit of milestones. It was measured by the quiet moments, the mornings that started with a shared cup of coffee, the nights filled with gratitude, and the small gestures that meant so much more than anything they had ever chased before. Mark no longer felt the need to pursue every horizon. He chose the ones that mattered most. And Kelly, in her own way, learned that the most meaningful stories are those shared between two people, in the quiet moments when no one else is watching. Finding strength in connection. Their journey wasn't about the absence of fear, but about finding strength in the face of it. They learned that love doesn't guarantee safety or certainty, but it does promise companionship. Together, Kelly and Mark move forward, no longer rushing toward the future, but stepping into it hand in hand, imperfect, but deeply connected. Their journey reminded them that love isn't about always having answers or control. It's about being present, being vulnerable, and choosing each other every day. And in that quiet, humble understanding, they found strength, not in certainty, but in the connection that had always been the true foundation of their relationship.